Good morning. Welcome to Sunday Square Off. I'm Bram Resnick. We start with the investigation of the Phoenix Police Department. 15 Black Lives Matter protesters were arrested at a rally last October. With the help of Phoenix Police, prosecutors who work for Maricopa County Attorney Alistair Adel charged them with felonies as criminal gang members. Here's what a report by the law firm Ballard Spahr concluded about those charges. Quote, police and prosecutors orchestrated the criminal street gang case with inconsistent and inaccurate police reports, dubious grand jury testimony, and deeply flawed legal conclusions. The fallout was swift. Chief Jeri Williams was suspended for 1 day. 3 of her 5 assistant chiefs were demoted. A police sergeant faces a criminal investigation, and a larger investigation of what happened is likely. Joining us now is the police chief's boss, City Manager Ed Zuercher. It was Ed Zuercher who ordered the Black Lives Matter arrests investigation. Welcome back to Square Off, sir.
Thanks for having me, Bram.
And I have to give my usual disclosure when I interview a City of Phoenix official. My wife is a City of Phoenix employee. Now, let's get to the news. The charges against the 15 protesters were dropped after the cases blew up in the media. 15 people were charged as felons for exercising their First Amendment rights of free speech and assembly in the city of Phoenix. Ed, what do you say to them now that this report is out?
I would say that I'm sorry that happened and it shouldn't have happened. And the reports make it very clear that it shouldn't have happened and that there were failures among our staff and that we have to address and that we've begun addressing.
Now, tell us more about the 1-day suspension for Chief Jeri Williams. Why was she suspended?
So the report lays out the issues where we had individual officers really colluding with the county attorney's office in concocting the charges that were then thrown out of court. And actually, there's a judge's decision that really lays into them about that. They took some actions. She was not communicated with by her staff, and she never knew what happened. But as the chief of the department, she needs to know what happened. She needs to have a system where that's happening. And it's for that breakdown that she received personal accountability, and she accepted that.
So has she served that suspension yet?
Yes.
And let's talk about this breakdown you described. The investigators' report says 14 Phoenix cops, including 3 of Jeri Williams' 5 assistant chiefs, were meeting with county prosecutors on these felony gang charges against the protesters. And Jeri Williams apparently didn't know about it. You must have hit the roof when you heard that.
I did. It's very upsetting. The chief hit the roof when she read the report as well. Because that's not how the system is set up. That's not why we have the structure in place. There are policies, there are procedures in place about the right way to determine whether someone is a member of a gang, and that policy is set up so that there can't be unjust decision making. That policy was skirted. It was not followed, and then just practice of how you communicate with your superiors, particularly in an organization, a hierarchical organization like police, has to be followed. It wasn't in this case. That's unacceptable, and that's why the chief made the changes that you described.
But the question is why on both sides and on these assistant chiefs' sides? How could she not know what they were doing on an issue that is so explosive?
Well, I mean, in the moment, if they aren't telling her, she's not aware what decisions are being made and how that's made, and then it's handed back to the county attorney. So, but that is a very big problem, and that's what she has to address.
But what do we know about that, about why that happened? Because according to the investigative report, there's a lot we still don't know because they didn't get the full cooperation of police. So what do we know about the interaction between the chief and those 3 assistant chiefs, not to mention the 11 other officers who were at that meeting?
Well, what we know is that there wasn't any on this subject and that the decision making was pushed into that group and it stayed in that group. And it didn't even it didn't even follow the process laid out clearly of how those charges should have been determined or how the determination of gang membership should have been determined. That was skirted as well. So the whole thing was done improperly, in my view.
A lot of people, perhaps rightly so, will suspect, you know what, this was a group of rogue cops and maybe rogue prosecutors who were going up a group that is viewed by many as anti-cop, and they decided we're going to shut them down. Is that what happened here?
Well, that's what's disturbing, is that if that is the case, that is, as you'd also described, Bram, that is affecting people's First Amendment rights, fundamental rights as Americans to protest. And that is not the business that the police department should be in. And that's what the chief also has to address, is we have to ensure that we're respecting people's First Amendment rights, and our police officers, even when the protests are against the police, our police officers have to respect that. Now, I would say, I think that generally happened last summer. We had almost 180 days of protests downtown, and I think in the vast majority of cases, our police acted with complete professionalism. In this case, a very, very dramatic case and very impactful to those people, I don't want to diminish that, they failed what they should do, and we have to make sure that doesn't happen again.
But again, is the word failed the right word? Because this appears to have been an effort to shut down this group. They didn't fail. They just apparently, based on this report, ignored the rules and the processes you described and actively tried to shut down a group.
Well, yeah,
so isn't it letting them off the hook to say failed?
Well, what failed was the checks and balances of a system where they're supposed to have a process with experts in the gang field. There's supposed to be communication so that there's proper decision making is at the proper level for something as impactful as charging felonies on protests. And that's another issue that the chief is going to address, is those sorts of decisions will no longer be able to be made unless they are directly taken through the police chief.
What does this say about the chief's leadership, that 3 of her deputies didn't report this back to her?
Well, I think it speaks more to the leadership of the people who didn't report to her, frankly. I think we need to first make sure we're addressing the behaviors that people undertook themselves, and that's what she's doing by making those reassignments. But on a broader level, she also then has to ensure, and this is a strong message, that that sort of choice is not going to be tolerated.
The investigators tell us at the end of this 52-page report, they recommend that you order another investigation. So what's next? What would that investigation look like?
Sure. So there are questions here of criminal culpability, and people, there is due process here. So I don't want to jump to conclusions on that. But in order to reach determinations of criminal activity, we need another law enforcement agency to investigate that question of, was there issues in the grand jury testimony? Was the collusion and the decision making, did that rise to a criminal level? That has to be done by an external agency. I have asked the Arizona Attorney General to be that outside agency. They have not responded yet, which is not surprising because it's going to take them a little time to review it. But that is my hope, is that the Arizona Attorney General will be an outside agency to look at that question.
You may have missed this in all the stuff going on, but Mark Brnovich's spokesman, AG Mark Brnovich's spokesman, told the Arizona Republic he doesn't believe he has jurisdiction here. It sounds like he hasn't told you that yet.
I read that in the paper, but I'm going to await an official word and an official explanation. And based on that explanation, we'll make a decision if we have to go to another external agency, and we will find someone to investigate this.
So where do you go?
We'll have to find another agency that has appropriate resources and jurisdiction to do it.
Talking about possible criminal culpability, what kind of crimes may have occurred?
Well, there's a Superior Court judge's ruling when the cases were dismissed that talked about issues with the grand jury testimony and also perhaps with the writing of the reports as to whether they were true and factual. That's a question that has to be determined. But potential perjury to a grand jury is one that comes to mind from the Ballard Spahr report. Would
any of those top assistants face potential criminal exposure?
I'm not sure. We're going to have that reviewed. I don't believe that the activity they undertook was criminal in nature, but that's for a prosecuting agency to determine.
Over the last 5 years, this police department has been through study after investigation after study after investigation. What are Phoenix taxpayers supposed to make of all this? Because they pay for this. They pay for the police chief. They pay for you.
Yeah.
What are they supposed to make of all this and what it says about how well this department is working for them?
Sure. Well, it's interesting, just to put it in context. I just took a look at 2 days this week. We answered on Wednesday and Thursday of this week almost 12,000 calls for service. So in the midst of all this, the Phoenix Police Department is being called to service and they're responding. Someone answers the phone, they dispatch the call, and the officers respond. On a 2-day period, 12,000 times. We have to continue that. We have to continue doing that well. We have these situations, as we're describing, which are high profile and very troubling and have to be addressed. But I think the fundamental public safety work of the Phoenix Police Department is serving our community, serving the taxpayers. But we have to address the systemic issues as they arise, when they arise. And we've been doing that, Bram. We've been investing in training. The City Council has approved an Office of Accountability and Transparency. We're introducing crisis intervention teams. We're introducing a community assistance program. We've changed policy. We've done those things, but we're going to continue to do those things to make the department better.
And yet the Department of Justice is investigating now, a sweeping investigation of what's happened here over the last several years. Does that tell taxpayers something's wrong?
Well, we have to see what the Department of Justice tells us. We've been addressing things that people have said are wrong. And in the list of things that I mentioned, the Department of Justice says they now want to come in and take a look. And as we said, we're going to be open and cooperative. We will take feedback from anybody who will give it to us. We'll assess it and we'll make changes that come from it. But I want to be clear, it's not as if we haven't been working and doing things. We have had a long history of making reforms, body-worn cameras, early intervention system, all those things. We're continually trying to improve our process. It is a big system, it is a complex system, and really policing in the entire United States is at issue, and we're part of that dialogue.
You said this about Chief Williams after the DOJ announced its sweeping investigation of Phoenix police a few weeks ago. Quote, "I'm confident under the leadership of Chief Jeri Williams, the Phoenix Police Department can and will continue to do better for the residents of Phoenix." Does this report shake your confidence in Chief Williams' ability to get that job done?
No, it doesn't. What I've seen from Chief Williams with this report and before, but especially since this report, is another gear, another level of determination that this department is going to continue to evolve and change to serve the residents of Phoenix. She is committed. She grew up in Phoenix. She's from Phoenix. She is committed to the community, and she's committed to making this department better.
Last question. You're retiring in 2 months after almost 30 years of service to the city. It seems to me the police department has been one of the biggest items you've dealt with over the last 8 years. What advice will you give your successor about managing a police department and a chief?
Well, yes, I am retiring in October after that time, and it's been a great time working for the city. You know, the police department is a significant part of the time of the city manager because it's a significant part of the city. It's the largest single department, the largest single investment. So it does take a lot of time and energy, but you have to have a good chief. You have to trust in that chief, and you have to hold that chief accountable for activity. And I think that's what we're doing here and what's happening. And I would tell my successor, continue to do those things, but you also have to remember there's many more things going on at the city of Phoenix than the police department. When people turn on their tap, when they put their garbage out to the curb, when they go to the library, there's so many things that we do at the city of Phoenix, in addition to answering 911 calls, that also take time and energy, that I'm also very proud of. But the police department is at focus here. It will continue to be a focus. It will get better. It has to get better. And that's a main role of the city manager.
Ed Zuercher, thank you so much. Best wishes on your retirement.
Thank you, Bram. Very much appreciated.